mysterious man wearing a long coat commits the strangest bank robbery in Japanese history. This theft was not an armed robbery, nor was there any hostage-taking or anything. A theft with mysterious and shocking events. A strange and scary story. But with all this, the story is much deeper than just a bank robbery. I don't want to spoil the events for you, so let's get into the story. The events of our story took place in the year 1948 in Japan, more than 70 years ago. At that time, a major event was taking place in the world, which was the Second World War. The conflict between Japan and America was burning. In the end, as we all know, America dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In addition, several small bombs were thrown at Japan, especially at the capital, Tokyo. This caused the Japanese Empire to fall, and the emperor announced surrender in the year 1945. This was the last event that happened in the Second World War. Then, after Japan's surrender, America entered Japan, and they became the ones running the country. The Japanese were in a very difficult situation during that period. The country had just emerged from the biggest war it had ever experienced, and starvation, homelessness, and diseases were spreading everywhere. 3 years have passed since the end of the war, and the year 1948 has come, the year in which the events of our story will begin. The situation is still the same, and America is still running the country. The events of the story begin on the 26th of January of the year 1948. A man entered one of the branches of a bank called the Imperial Bank of Japan. This branch had 21 employees, but on that day there were 7 employees absent due to sickness, including the branch director. During the afternoon of that day, the man entered the bank, and he was wearing a long brown jacket, and he had a tie wrapped around his left arm above the elbow, indicating that he was an official government employee, specifically an employee of the health ministry. He asked the employees for the bank director, and they told him that he is absent due to sickness, but the deputy manager is available. You can talk to him. The man presented himself as an epidemiologist from the Ministry of Health, and that there is a well in the area. They discovered that it may be the cause of the spread of silicosis, a long-term disease caused by inhaling unsafe levels of silica dust. He told the deputy director that the government currently trying to contain the disease and prevent its spread, so he brought medicines that everyone must take. He added that he was there by order of the American authorities. The deputy director hesitated at first, but the mysterious man convinced him, and he accepted. The deputy director went and gathered the 14 employees. There were 2 more people in the bank who were the wife and daughter of one of the employees. The doctor stood in front of them with small Japanese cups in his hands, and he said, "The medicine that I will give you may harm the teeth, so you must drink quickly, as I am drinking now in front of you, so that I can show you the correct method." Then he took out a bottle containing the medicine and poured some of it into one of the cups and drank it quickly in front of them. After that, the employees started drinking the medicine one by one. About 1 minute later, some of the employees started complaining that the medicine hurt their throats. So the doctor's response was that there is nothing to be afraid of, and this burning feeling will go away after a while. After that, the employees, including the deputy director Yoshida, asked him to go to the bathroom to wash their mouths. At that time, the mysterious doctor collected his things and the small cups that he had brought, and he went around the desks of the employees and took about 160,000 yen from the desk drawers and took a check of 17,000 yen. This amount is worth almost $10,000 in today's value. The employees started to fall on the ground one after one, and within 15 minutes, the mysterious doctor ran out from the bank and left behind 10 corpses. The medicine he gave them was a deadly poison. One of the bodies he left behind was that of an 8-year-old girl. A few hours later, one of the bank employees was still alive. He came out of the bank and started yelling and asking for help. The police were informed, and they came up to the bank and found 6 of the bank employees alive, so they took them to the nearest hospital to the bank. 2 of them died on the way, and only 4 remained alive. Police investigations began immediately. The first thing they did was that they spoke to the 4 survivors in order to obtain the characteristics of the criminal doctor. But unfortunately, their description was not very helpful, especially since the criminal didn't have any distinctive characteristics in his appearance. The only thing that investigators know from them is that the mysterious man is approximately between 40 and 50 years old. Then the investigators began to examine the crime scene, and they noticed that the criminal left a lot of money behind. Investigators began to wonder why he did not take all the money. And the second question that faced the investigators was, how did this criminal take the medicine or poison from the same bottle that he used for the employees? The 4 employees who survived said they were sure the criminal drank from the same bottle. How did he do that without being affected by the poison? However, the investigators knew later that the stolen check, which was worth 17,000 yen, was cashed in a second bank called Yasuda Bank, about 3 kilometers away from the bank that was stolen, meaning the criminal went to the second bank and cashed the check that he stole. The investigators went to this bank and asked for the information given to them by the person who cashed the check. The bank gave this information to the police, and they quickly discovered that the name and address that this man registered were fake. Investigations continued, and the police discovered that there were similar incidents that took place in 2 different banks in the same way. The first incident occurred in the month of October of the previous year, which is the year 1947, which means almost 3 months before the fatal incident that we talked about. In this incident, the mysterious doctor entered the bank. He entered and went to the manager and claimed that he was a doctor, and said the same thing. And actually, the same thing happened. The manager gathered the employees and everyone drank the medicine. The doctor kept looking suspiciously at his watch, but 10 minutes later nothing happened to the staff. So he simply took his things and left the bank, and nothing happened to anyone. That's why the incident was not reported. The investigators concluded later that this criminal was experimenting with his poison and its effectiveness. The second incident happened on the 20th of January 1948, almost a week before the fatal incident. This time, the criminal entered one of the branches of a bank called the Bank of Tokyo, and again the criminal claimed to be a doctor from the health ministry, and told the bank manager that there was a family called Uritani family suffering from crowding disease, and that they had information that Mr. Uritani visited the bank that day, so the place must be sterilized for the employees, and they must take some medicines. The director asked the doctor to give him a few moments to check their records, and he found that Mr. Uritani was a real person. He visited the bank that day and deposited a large amount. But the problem is that the address registered with them did not match the address that the doctor gave. The bank manager went to the alleged doctor and said that the address that they have for Mr. Uritani does not match this address. The criminal doctor told him that he will go back to the office to recheck the information he had, and later he will come back again. After that, the doctor came out of the bank in a hurry, and he didn't return to the bank again. However, these 2 incidents were not reported because they did not result in any damage or death. Investigators discovered that in both previous cases, the criminal gave the bank managers a business card as proof of his identity. But the card had 2 different names. The card from the second incident bore the name of Dr. Jeremy Gucci, and after the police searched for him, they realized that it was just a fake name that did not exist. But the card from the first incident that happened 3 months before our story, this card was under the name of Dr. Matsui, and this was a real person. The police were able to reach him and arrested him and began to interrogate him. But Dr. Matsui had a strong alibi. He said that he was in a meeting at the date of the crime, and indeed there were many witnesses who confirmed his presence. But this was not the end of the road. Dr. Matsui told the investigators that these cards were a limited edition, as he had only printed 100 copies of them. And he used to give it only if he was in some rare cases for business or in an official place, and he only give it in case of an exchange of business cards, meaning each of the 2 parties gave the other his card. And he had a special habit when giving his card. He always wrote on the back of any card he got when he gave it, where he gave it, and to whom he gave it. He told the investigators that he distributed 92 cards and only 8 cards remained with him. Because of this habit, investigators will be able to track down the people he exchanged with. 20 of them were women. The other 62 people who were tracked and acquitted of any connection to the crime had strong arguments and excuses. There were only 8 suspects left. This investigation process and the liquidation of the accused took a long time. At this time, the investigators received the preliminary results of the examination of the bodies, which confirmed the presence of a toxic substance containing cyanide. But there were other things and materials that they did not discover. One of the theories was that most likely the criminal put some type of oil inside the bottle, so the oil floated on the poison because the oil has a lighter density, so it always floats above it. When the criminal poured himself into the cup, he did not pour himself poison. He only poured oil. This explains also the 4 employees who drank after him are still alive. Almost 6 months have passed since the incident, and the police are still continuing their investigations, and they were able to reach the 8 suspects through the business cards distributed by Dr. Matsui. Out of these 8, they only focused on one suspect who was identical in many specifications to him. This suspect was a man in his 50s. His name was Sadamichi Hirosawa, a man who was a painter and an art teacher. The reason the police focused on this man was that they found out that he had been arrested 4 times previously because he tried to cash forged checks. When the investigators asked him about the business card he took from Dr. Matsui, he told them that his wallet had been stolen 4 months ago and that all the cards in it were lost. The second and most important thing that the police knew from their investigation was that he had deposited 130,000 yen into his bank account in the same week after the incident. And when they asked him where he got this amount from, he refused to give any clarifications about the source of the money. This thing made them suspect him more, and he became the main suspect in the case. The police arrested Sadamichi Hirosawa and took him to Tokyo, where they began a long and intense investigations, and they brought the 4 employees who survived the incident to give their testimony and see his appearance, and they brought 7 other witnesses who were around the bank at the time of the incident. But the strange thing is that none of them confirmed that this person is the one who entered the bank at that day. The police brought a special investigator who was known for his brutal methods of investigation, so he started using his methods. He deprived him of sleep and tortured Sadamichi, psychologically and physically, and the torture was unbearable. 3 days after this torture, the accused confessed to the crime. He said he was the perpetrator of the operation. After this period he spent in prison, the interrogations, and the psychological torture he was subjected to. He was shocked as if he was unaware of what was around him. He remained in the hospital receiving treatment, and after a few weeks, his trial began. And imagine that when he stood up in court afterward, he denied all the confessions he had made. He said that he was forced to confess due to the torture he was subjected to, and the written confession was never what he signed. He said that the signature was forged and the entire confession was forged. In the trial, he was still suffering from the shock and was not in a good mental state, but he was desperate to deny the charges against himself, insisting that the confessions are not valid. During the trial period, important reports were released by the 2 university hospitals that analyzed the poison found in the corpses, Tokyo and the Kyoto University. They discovered that the toxic substance which was used in the crime had a connection with something frightening about Japan's military history. The Japanese Army had a special chemical unit, officially known as the Anti-Epidemiology Unit or Water Purification Unit, and they call it Unit 731. This unit has a very dark reputation and secrets. This unit has been known to conduct dangerous experiments on humans. The question now is, how did Sadamichi Hirosawa get a poison like this? He did not work in this unit before, and he has no direct connection to it. A theory emerged that the perpetrator of the operation was most likely a soldier or a doctor who previously worked in Unit 731, and there was a theory that the Japanese authorities had accused the Sadamichi because they wanted to close this case. Although he kept denying the charges and denying the confessions he made under torture, the judicial system in Japan used to deal with the confessions as if they were absolute, regardless of the way they were taken. During the trial, details emerged that justified the things they considered evidence against him. The first thing is the reason why he tried to cash forged checks before the theft. So the explanation is that he had a mental illness, making him forget and settle things that are contrary to his nature. This was the reason that made him settle the attempts to cash the forged checks. Moreover, he submitted documented medical reports to the court. As for the second thing, which is the amount that was deposited in the bank a few days after the theft, some of his relatives testified that he sometimes worked on some adults' paintings because they were sold more, so he was forced to resort to this job because of his hard financial situation. This is the reason why he didn't tell the police about the source of the money. However, after all this, after a long trial that lasted about 2 years, on July 24, 1950, Sadamichi Hirosawa was found guilty and officially sentenced to death. The strange thing is that the sentence was not executed and all the appeals were rejected, and he remained stuck in prison for 40 years. During this period, he drew more than 1,300 paintings during this period. At the age of 95, Sadamichi died in prison after suffering from an illness. The story of this man is very sad, and although he was officially considered the perpetrator of the operation and the case closed, the relatives of Sadamichi, even after his death, continued to submit requests to the judicial system to retrial. And the last of these requests was in the year 2015. In total, 20 requests for retrial were submitted, but all of them got rejected. There are some theories that this operation was an American experiment on humans. This theory can explain why the criminal left a large amount of money in the bank, even though he had it within his reach. Some others say that someone who was in a criminal organization made this experience to test the effectiveness of this poison, especially since there were previous attempts in 2 other banks before. Here we come to the end of the story. Share your opinions and your theories about this case in the comments below. Goodbye. See you in the next video.